What I want to talk about today is nutrition and exercise. Now, there's, for us, kind of three different phases when it comes to nutrition and exercise. Now, keep in mind, like I always say, I'm not going to give you all the answers. I can't. It's YouTube. Plus, I don't know anything about you. We're all individualized. Physiologically, you know, what level of healing you're in, etc. What type of exercise you can handle. At the same time, there's kind of three phases we think about when it comes to people when we're working with them healing. There's essentially, when I say exercise, it's all person dependent. For some people, the only exercise they can handle is actually walking every other day or every day. For some people, it can actually be kind of stability or strength training or power training. It's all person dependent. It really comes down to the variables we use in assessing your client to figure out exactly what they need. Now, some people say that when you're healing, no one should exercise. That's true, but I like to keep my clients moving because when you move, you actually pump the lymphatic system. So if someone's really, let's say, of an autoimmune disease, of course, when I say exercise, I'm not saying go and do intense workouts. Let's start with actually walking maybe for 10 minutes every other day, and we increase it, you know, as they end up working with us longer, and eventually they end up doing the right type of exercise. So just keep that in mind when I'm using exercise generally. There's the time of working out, the workout itself. There's the time right after a workout, you know, 30 to 45 minutes for us. And then there's the time from that to the next workout. Now that time is a longer amount of time for most people. That's what we do with most people one-on-one. So I'm not going to give you a lot of information on that. That's what we do with people one-on-one to regulate, you know, their body temperature and pulse based off their logs, their ratios, their grams. So that's kind of in between the workouts per se. And it could be bike riding, it could be hiking, it could be dancing, whatever it may be. What I want to talk about is when we're actually working out, when we're actually expending energy, and when we're actually, right after the workout, expending energy, and we actually want to push our body into a more anabolic state. And we actually do this indirectly by down-regulating the catabolic systems. So what I'm talking about here is we're actually not pushing the body anabolic by doing something that's pushing an anabolic, like taking an anabolic steroid or taking a supplement. We're actually using food in alignment with what's going on in the body to actually down-regulate and blunt the catabolic reaction in the body, because exercise, no matter how you slice it, is catabolic. You're breaking the body down. And the body tries to adapt to it, so if we can modulate it, we can actually regulate the inflammatory response. And if we can do that, we indirectly increase, or we indirectly stimulate the anabolic aspect of our body, in a sense. Now, I'll talk about this, but when we're working out, it's really important nutritionally. Now, of course, what we do the day of the workout is really important, and that's the nutrition we do with people from after workout into the next workout, but we're talking about actually right during the workout. Nutrition is so important because if we get the right amounts of nutrients and we get the right amount of foods that are non-inflammatory, we can actually increase nutrient delivery to the muscle during the workout. Kind of reading off some of my notes here. We can actually spare glycogen use in the muscle. That's a lot. Most of the glycogen in the body is actually stored in your muscle, the next place in your liver, and the next place in your blood, a small amount in your blood. So we can actually decrease the amount of glycogen that's used if we have the right amount of nutrition. And we can decrease the amount of protein that's synthesized as well. We can actually limit immune system suppression if we have the right amount of nutrition during a meal. We can minimize muscle damage in itself. We can actually set the stage for a faster recovery, because even though we're using a lot of ATP, we can actually replenish it a lot faster, and we're not producing a lot of lactic acid, which is highly inflammatory and highly excitable at the cell level, which can easily lead to cell death, which can easily push the body into a deeper inflammatory response. Same thing after working out. For us, that's kind of the window where it's more important, because after a workout, our cells are very, very sensitive to insulin. Now, we've talked about insulin as being something we want to regulate, because anytime insulin goes up, estrogen goes up. We don't want that. But after a workout, our cells are very sensitive to insulin, so we need to utilize this to down-regulate the hyperinsulinic response, but also use insulin to our advantage in this scenario, as well as potassium, to get sugar in the cell, because our body needs it. We increased our energy demand. We worked out, so we have to meet that. We have to meet the demands we place on our body with other energy requirements, which is food. So if we can actually get the right nutrition after workout, we can actually shift our metabolic machinery or physiology from a catabolic state to an anabolic state. We can actually speed the elimination of any type of muscle waste that's actually been built up, like lactic acid, which is something we want to actually prevent. We can initiate tissue repair. We can actually replenish muscle glycogen and liver glycogen, which is so important, because if we do this, we can actually downregulate an adrenaline response later on. And we can, once again, reduce muscle damage and reduce any suppression in the immune system. So as I've talked about before, in our society, one of the biggest things is let's increase the demands that we place on our body, which is exercise and working out and doing all these crazy-ass workouts, but decrease the energy that we actually are taking in. So we increase the energy demands, but we decrease the energy that we take in order to lose weight, because we think that weight loss is a sign of health. Six-pack of abs, that means you're healthy. You're skinny and ripped, that means you're healthy. Unfortunately, that's a very superficial view of health. I work with so many people who are ripped, who have six-packs, who are jacked and yoked, and are the spinning image of health, but unfortunately, when it comes down to it, they're infertile, they have PMS, they're chronically depressed, they have chronic GI problems and chronic gas. They're just not physiologically happy. On the outside of the shell, they look good, but internally they're not happy. So that's a one-way ticket towards a future of disease, because anytime you sacrifice long-term health to meet short-term needs, and you do that by increasing the demand you place on the body, but decreasing the amount of energy or calories you take in, the body has to survive. So you're living in survival mode. You're constantly pumping out adrenaline. You're constantly pumping out cortisol. And that's why you end up with a lot of these symptoms. You don't get your cycle. You have PMS. You're infertile, etc. Why would the universe allow you to have a baby and, have an embryo implanted into your body, per se, and support it if you can't even support the body you're actually given? So anytime you sacrifice long-term survival for short-term needs, that's basically a scenario for disease later on in life, osteoporosis later on in life, diabetes later on in life. All of these diseases that everyone says, as you get older, you get. Unfortunately, that's not something I actually conform to. Because if we lead a life and we really listen to our body, we can actually prevent these things. Just because you get old doesn't mean you get Alzheimer's. Just because you get old doesn't mean you get diabetes and arthritis. These are things that we can actually prevent from happening in the body, because they're all signs of inflammatory processes going on in the body. Anytime the body is stressed, anytime you starve the body, not only just starving, like don't eat, I just mean you're not meeting your metabolic demands. You're working out, you're overtraining, but you're not meeting the energy requirements with food. You're eating inflammatory foods. You're not eating enough during the day. You're not eating enough calories. Most people we work with, once we have them log their foods initially, they're blown away because they log their foods, they think they're eating a lot, and they're taking in 900 calories. That's not enough calories to even make it through the day. Doesn't matter who you are. So anytime you're stressed, you're starved, you're overtraining, the body relies on fats for energy. Now, our body can use fats for energy. The primary fuel source is glucose at the cell level. This is how we produce steroidal hormones, and this is how we produce carbon dioxide and ATP. But the body can use fats, and it does this because intrauterine, according to Ray Peat and many others embryologically, the intrauterine environment is very warm, and the warmth actually allows the baby to convert glucose into saturated fats. The problem is, if the intrauterine environment of the mother is not getting enough glucose in their body, or sucrose, which is fructose and glucose, because the infant actually prefers the fructose and they convert it to glucose, the mother's body actually starts to kind of eat itself. It starts to break down proteins, amino acids, and fats to produce glucose. The problem is now, instead of using glucose to produce saturated fats, the mother and the embryo actually start to use free fatty acids for energy. And this is actually the start of the inflammatory process. So going back to what I was saying, anytime someone's stressed, they're starved, they're overtraining, this leads to an increased reliance on fats for energy. Now these fats actually come from stored tissue. And this is a lot of people, a lot of different people out there, a lot of different diet regimens. This is their whole thing. We want to use fat for energy and store tissue so we can break down fats. Well, one of the main hormones, there's many, that's doing this is glucagon. Anytime blood sugar is low, not only cortisol, glucagon goes up to increase blood sugar in the body. But one thing glucagon does is it actually breaks down fat. Now the problem is, along with cortisol, this is actually very hypometabolic for our cells at the cell level. So it inhibits mitochondrial respiration. and it pushes our body towards lipid oxidation using fats for energy instead of using glucose for energy and glucose oxidation. And I've talked about 1,000,001 times what this can lead to, because our cells need glucose for fuel. You need glucose to produce T4 into T3. You need glucose to produce your steroidal hormones. The list is endless. So we need this, and if we're not getting it, the glucagon, the cortisol, gluconeogenesis, this is an adaptive mechanism. This is actually not how our body is actually designed to actually work. Use amino acids to produce glucose. Cancer cells actually feed on amino acids to produce glucose. So you can see kind of the correlation between the diets and cancer cells. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. That's not the state you want your cells to be in. We want our cells to be working properly. We want our cells to actually be in a state of aerobic respiration most of the time, because they're using oxygen efficiently to actually produce water, ATP, and carbon dioxide. So we don't want our body utilizing fats for energy, and this is what a lot of people go towards. They want their body to almost release cortisol and release glucagon to break down fats, to regulate blood sugar, but also help you lose weight. And as we've talked about, weight loss isn't the sign of health. As we've talked about, you have to get healthy to lose weight, not lose weight to get healthy. So think about that. Now, when it comes to exercise, of course, certain things can actually be elevated excessively when we exercise, estrogen being one of them, and growth hormone being one of them. Now, I've talked about the many dangers of estrogen, and it typically goes up because exercise is inflammatory and insulin goes up. Growth hormone goes up, and it can be beneficial, but this is why you get the swelling in a lot of your muscles. And in excess, growth hormone is actually highly inflammatory. And these hormones alone, among many other things, can cause a lot of edema in the cells, in the nerves. This is why when people actually take growth hormones, injectable growth hormones, a lot of them get carpal tunnel syndrome because it causes swelling of the nerves in the different tunnels in the body. But it can cause a lot of hypoxia and ischemia in the GI system as well. So exercise in itself, if we don't modulate it with the right nutrition, can actually lead to a lot of GI problems. Because if we have hypoxia and ischemia, and we get a lot of leakiness in the GI system from increased estrogen, increased growth hormone, and we're not modulating it with nutrition, we get an increased absorption of endotoxin and bacteria, which overloads the liver, yada, 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 increases the stress response. So we can actually heal the gut if we want to work out with the right types of nutrition and downregulate the amount of bacteria and endotoxin that's actually being absorbed by indirectly downregulating estrogen and growth hormone. Now, there's two systems in the body. Now, I don't want to get into how to train because it's so person-specific and it's so complex and it's a little bit of a brain twister. But we have two systems in the body. We have the anaerobic system, which is the phosphagen system, which is the glycolytic and the creatine phosphate system. I'm sorry, the phosphagen system, which is your glycolytic and creatine phosphate. And then you have, I'm a tongue twister here. You have your phosphagen system and your glycolytic system. Those are the two anaerobic systems. The creatine phosphate is part of the phosphagen system. So you have these two anaerobic systems. Now, these anaerobic systems, to really just simplify it, they're really efficient at producing ATP during high-intensity workouts, but at the same time, you have the higher risk at producing lactic acid. And typically with these systems, to simplify it, you're producing ATP really quickly within the first 8 to 10 to 20, 30 seconds, 40 seconds of exercise. It's used very quickly, and then the aerobic system kicks in. So these systems, aerobic systems at the cell level, are efficient at producing ATP, but you run a higher risk at actually producing lactic acid because you're anaerobic. You're not using oxygen efficiently. Your other system is the aerobic system. And when I'm talking the cell level, I'm not talking about working out. And that's where it can get a little confusing. Now, at the cell level, the aerobic system is when we're using oxygen efficiently. We're using glucose. We're using T3 in the mitochondria efficiently to actually produce water, ATP, and carbon dioxide. This is aerobic cellular respiration. This is what we want to preserve when we're actually working out. This is what we want to preserve by altering the variables when we work out. Sets, reps, load, intensity, tempo, all these different things, volume. How many days we work out per week, as well as using nutrition. We're always trying to modulate aerobic respiration. We don't want to train aerobically, because if you train aerobically, you're actually going breathless. If you go breathless, you're creating an oxygen debt, just like unsaturated fats and estrogen do at the cell level, which causes hypoxia, which produces excess lactic acid. And excess lactic acid is inflammatory, which causes increased lactic acid production. So it's just a cycle. So you don't want to train aerobically to actually preserve the aerobic system. You actually want to train anaerobically in itself. Now, it's a lot more complex than this. You have to look at the person, how much they can handle. You're looking at body temperature and pulse. But you want to train anaerobically the way we do with people with longer rests to actually preserve the aerobic cellular systems in the body and use nutrition to actually modulate the system. Because anytime you have this oxygen in the system, this is really what causes inflammation in the body. This is what causes the body to produce excess cortisol, to increase or reduce inflammation, increase blood glucose. And the fortunate thing is it actually breaks down bone, demineralizes bone, it actually catabolizes muscle, and it can inhibit thyroid production. So we don't want to have this oxygen debt because at the same time it's actually going to lower your pulse. And we've talked about this. People with a low pulse are not essentially healthy. They're actually showing that at the cell level they have altered cellular respiration. Because thyroid hormone, a T3, regulates this. It speeds up the system or slows down the system. You have enough, you have a sped up system. You have a normal body temperature, you have a normal pulse, 75 to 85 beats per minute. When you don't have enough T3 going through the cell, you have altered cellular respiration or aerobic respiration at the cell level. You're not producing enough ATP and carbon dioxide. There's an oxygen debt. T3 comes down. You don't have enough T3. You see people's pulses actually drop. So for us, a sign of a low pulse isn't actually a sign of health. It's actually a sign of altered cellular respiration. And you can see this because most endurance athletes train aerobically. They go breathless, which actually causes an oxygen debt at the cell level because they're not meeting their metabolic needs nutritionally. Now, let me get to the punch here with the information because this is a long YouTube. What can you do? Well, as I mentioned, exercise is catabolic. The bottom line is you're increasing the energy demand. Anytime the cells are excited or swollen, you're producing lactic acid, whatever's going on, they need more energy. How do you get more energy to the cell? You need to supply your body with the right nutrition during and post-exercise. Research shows that actually during exercise and post-exercise, the combination of a carbohydrate with a protein, now of course we go into the types of carbs and proteins, so for us, we like to use pulp-free orange juice and gelatin. You can use tropical fruits because they have a higher saturated to unsaturated fat content in them. So you can use a tropical fruit and a non-inflammatory protein if you want, but we prefer gelatin, orange juice and gelatin. It's easy. But it shows that carbs and protein in itself used during a workout and post-workout with up to 45 minutes post-workout, your cells are very sensitive to insulin at this point, especially after your workout. That if you use carbs and proteins together, now finding the right ratio for you is the most important thing. You might need 4 ounces of orange juice and 1 tablespoon of gelatin. You might need 8 ounces of orange juice and 3 tablespoons of gelatin. Now, what I use is, I use 12 ounces of orange juice, 12 ounces of carbonated water, and I do 3 tablespoons of gelatin. That's what works for me. You need to find the ratio that works for your metabolism based off your temperature and pulse. But when you use carbs and proteins during and post-workout, it's been shown that you can actually decrease glycogen depletion in the muscle. And if you decrease glycogen depletion, you actually increase endurance capacity of the muscle and the person. And if you take carbs and protein in during the workout and after the workout, you're regulating blood sugar, which can actually decrease fatigue or increase energy production at the cell level and the superficial level. At the same time, carbs and proteins during and post-workout up to 45 minutes, that's the window you need. I like to get people within 30 minutes so they get it in. Will also prevent a sharp rise in cortisol. If we prevent a sharp rise in cortisol, we actually increase protein synthesis. We actually increase repair. We downregulate the amount of lactic acid production. We decrease the chances of producing excess reverse T3. We decrease the chances of producing less T3, and we actually increase our chances of producing more T3. We decrease the chances of suppressing the immune system because cortisol will actually increase immunoglobulins in the immune system, in the gall system, in the gut. So there's many things that can happen from having a protein and a carb during and post-workout. At the same time, we've talked about how insulin is kind of hyperinsulinemia is so dangerous, but as we talked about, it's the ratio of other things in the body. We need insulin to get sugar into the cell. It's needed. We use potassium, and that's why we like orange juice, because potassium, or orange juice, is loaded with potassium, and it actually piggybacks sugar getting in the cell. So after a workout, when your cells are kind of sensitive to insulin, we can use this to our advantage. We can use the carbs and proteins to get, using insulin to get them in our cell to our advantage, because insulin post-workout drives muscle building and drives muscle repair. It's been shown that it can not only shut off cortisol, as I mentioned, but it increases protein synthesis, increases amino acid transport at the cellular level. It reduces protein degradation in the muscle. It increases glucose uptake by the cell, which is what we want, which preserves aerobic respiration. It increases muscle storage of glycogen, which is one of the most important things we talk about all the time, because if we can increase muscle storage of glycogen, if we can increase liver storage of glycogen, anytime, let's say you're not meeting your metabolic needs, instead of your body releasing tons of cortisol and pushing you into this inflammatory response, you actually have reserves in your muscle and your liver, and you can use them. If you don't have them, you're going to release adrenaline and cortisol and actually break down muscle tissue, because now your energy banks are actually low. So using carbs, proteins, and insulin at this time when your cells are sensitive to increase muscle storage of glycogen can actually help you in between the next workout with the foods you eat and prevent any type of hypoadrenaline or hypocortisol response. So it was a long YouTube. I'm glad to be back. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully you've learned something. I'm out of here.